Hi and welcome to another video, part of the series where we're building an e-commerce website with Django and React. To get started, all you need to do is head over to the Django React e-commerce GitHub repository. The link is in the description of this video. And once you clone or download this, then we can get started. Before we get into this, we just released our new course where we build a software as a service with the Django REST framework and React. We cover everything from scratch all the way to deploying. So if you're interested in more advanced and in-depth Django courses, then head over to our website, justdjango.com. The link is in the description of this video, and otherwise enjoy this one. So in the last one, we introduced different product variations. If I go here to product, we can head over to a product detail view, and we see the different variations, color and size, and then the item variations, which is red, blue, and green, and then small and medium. And now what we want to do is add these different variations to the cart, because right now if we add an item to the cart, we're simply just adding the base item, the shirt. We're not specifying anything related to these different variations. So that's what we want to cover in this one. And the place where we're going to do this, if we just log in here, and come back here to products. We're no longer going to be adding to cart here in the list view because we want to give that user the specification of the variation that they want to add. So here we'll create a drop-down form that when you press this button, it'll show you a select field for all the different variations that you have on this type of item. So in this case, that will be a color drop-down, a size drop-down, and then you can then submit that form and it will add this item to the cart, but along with the different variations that you've specified. So let me just add something to cart, and if we go to checkout, then here this is all going to remain the same. We'll just need to fix up the information that we fetch from our serializers when we're done, because there might be a few changes, but other than that, that's what we're going to be focusing on. This one is the whole concept of adding those different variations to the cart. So we can head on back into the code, and we're going to start off in our models, and we're going to have to make a small change here. So if we just come down here to the order, we'll start here at the top, which is the order, and going down we have items that are associated to the order with a many-to-many field, and that is the order item, which is this model here. So here we are linked to an item, which is a shirt or pants or some sort of item that is for sale. And in the last one, we introduced the item variation and the variation, which are kind of like extensions of the item. So what we want to do is just add another field to the order item, and that's going to be a many-to-many field of the item variation, so that when we add this item to the cart, we have to specify the different variations, and we'll make sure that the minimum number of variations that are specified here in the many-to-many field is equal to the number of variations that link to that item. So meaning in the case of the shirt, we have two variations, the color and the size. So when we add that item to cart, if we're adding any shirt to the cart, then we need to ensure that that shirt has two variations that are added to it. One specifying its color, one specifying its size. Otherwise, adding that item to the cart will fail. And so the way that we're going to do that is then just come here. We're going to call this the item variations, and it's going to be a many-to-many field of the item variation. Cool. So like this, we can then go and make migrations, and then we can migrate and then run the server again. And that's the only change we want to make here in the model. So now we can come back into the API and go to the serializers. And we have an order serializer, which is linking down to all of the order items via this serializer. And this serializer is using the item serializer to serialize the item even further. And now we want to add some more serializers to serialize this item variations many-to-many field. And that's going to come here above the order item serializer. So we'll create another class, and we can actually just copy this one here above. So the item serializer, we'll just copy that. And I'm going to call this the variation detail serializer. and it's going to be a model serializer. Then we need to just make sure our two models are imported here. So the model is going to be the variation. Then the fields, I'm just going to get rid of all of those except for ID, and we can get rid of those methods there. And I'm just going to copy and paste this again and create another one called the item variation detail serializer. Then this model is going to be the item variation. And if we take a look at the model here, the item variations is a many-to-many field with the item variation, which is this model here. So the fields that we want to specify in our fields here in the serializer is going to be the value and the attachment. And then of course the variation as well. So let's just paste them all here. And the variation, instead of just linking straight to the foreign key of this variation instance, we're going to use the variation detail serializer to serialize that instance even further. So we'll get more nested serialization out of that. So we can just bring these all in here. Now the variation, if we want to use the variation detail serializer to go further, we're going to need to add a serializer method to go and grab that. So this is going to be called variation. And then here we'll have a method, and it's going to be get variation, which takes self and object. Then we're going to return this variation detail serializer of object.variation. Then we can just grab .data at the end of that. Now here on the variation detail serializer, we can come back here to the model and check the fields here, and it's just the item and the name. Now if we link to the item, then that's going to come down here to the item serializer. We wouldn't be using this serializer, but we don't actually need the information of the item because we'll have that anyway from higher up. So we'll just keep it as the ID and the name. And then we can actually just come down here to the order item. So this order item serializer, right now we're getting a string serialization of the item, which is basically its title. Because if we just come here to the order item, then if we look here, item, which is a field on the order item, which is a foreign key there, that is a string serializer. And that basically means if we go up to the item model, it means return the string representation of the model, which is self.title. And we have that item's title in the item object. So I'm going to get rid of item like that. And we can actually rename item object to be the item because that's what it is. So we can get rid of the item object field there. And then this is going to be called get item, not get item object. And then we need to make sure that we get all of the item variations by using this item variation detail serializer. So we'll come here and we can say item variations equals to a serializer method field. Then we'll have another method here. And this is going to be get item variations. Then here we want to use the item variation detail serializer to serialize those instances. And because this is a many-to-many field, if we just come back here, this is a many-to-many field of the item variation. That means that we're going to say object.item variations.all, but then we need to just pass in many equals true because we're passing in a query set. And then we access .data at the end of that. Cool, so those are the fixes to our serializers. So now, if we try and come back and just refresh this, we can actually just inspect. And we're already getting a 500 internal server error at the order summary query. We can go and check this out. So let's see, it was not included in the fields. Oh, okay, we just need to put that here. Okay, come back here, refresh this. All right, so now this is showing that we're getting all the data, and now it's just that the properties of those JavaScript objects have changed. So here, this is layout.js 49. So we can just go into source containers, layout, and we go to line 49. And now we're accessing .item, which if we take a look here, item is now grabbing us an entire object. It's no longer a title. So instead of it being .item, it has to be item.title to go even further. And there we go. Now that's working. Cool. So that's that fixed. We can go and close layout. And now if we just click here and go to checkout. All right. So now we can start fixing these errors where we have item object. So that's going to be in order summary. So let's just go to order summary. And we saw that that was line 87. So we can just scroll down. So here where we have item object, this is no longer item object. It's just item. So we can remove everywhere where there's item object, and I'll just search for it as well. Cool. So that's all of those. Can come back here. And cool. So all of that is displaying exactly as it was. And now we want to go into our products and first remove this button here because we want to add the drop down form. So you can only add the item to cart from the detail view. So we can go into the product list and scroll down. And here inside the item extra, we have this button, which I'm just going to comment out. Then we can come back here. Cool. We navigate here. And let's see, we have each child in the list must have a key, which is in line 132. And that's in product detail. So we can scroll down to 132. And here we're passing a key just a little bit too low. It needs to go at the top component. Cool. All right, so now when we hit this add to cart button, we want to show a drop down, which is going to display that form. So we're going to manage that in the state. We'll come up to the top and we'll create a form visible property here, which is just going to be false by default. Then we can add a method here, and this is going to be called handle toggle form. And all this is going to do is just call this .set state. And we just want to set form visible to be the opposite of what it is now. So we can say constant form visible equals this .state. And then we can set it to be the opposite of that. So just with the exclamation mark. And then this handle toggle form is what we will put as the on-click event when we click add to cart. So we're going to call this .handle toggle form. And then this call here to add the item to cart, that we're going to put inside the form instead. So just outside the card over here, we're going to put a form. We're going to put form.field, and let's just go and import form at the top here. So form. Then we can just come back here. So form.field. And at the end, it's going to be form.button. And then we're going to add the on-click event here. So on-click equals what used to be here. So we can just cut that there. Okay, and we could say submit. Okay, so we only want to display the form if the form visible value is true. So first we need to access it here in the state. So that's form visible. And then we can take this, come down here, and we'll say form visible and then display all of that. So already if we hit there, we have our submit button. Cool. And what I'm actually going to do is just bring in a divider. This is just so that we can put some more spacing between the card and the form. So I'm going to wrap this all in a React fragment. And we can just put that around the form. And then here we'll put a divider. Cool. So if I add to cart, then we get that little divider there. And so these form fields are basically going to be select fields where we can select from the options based on what variations this item has. Now we already have all the data loaded here in the page, so we don't need to make any more calls to fetch that data. And that's all inside data. Then here, if we look at data, we have data.variations. That's all we need for those select fields. And we can investigate select fields here from the drop-down component on the semantic UI React page. Basically, a select component is the exact same thing as a drop-down. And the one I'm looking at right now is the controlled drop-down, which is very similar to the select. So what I'm going to do is just copy drop down there. Then we can come and import drop down here from the top, and inside our form, in this form field is where we want to put our drop down. So just put it like this. So handle change is an event we're going to need to add on our class. So we'll just add it here, handle change. This is going to take an event, and then it also takes in some properties such as the name of the element and the value of that input. So we can just do this, console.log name and console.log value. Okay. Then if we just come back here, the options, I'm just going to set this to an empty array for now, and we can just say value. We'll just comment that out. So if we come back here, add to cart, there's our choose option drop down. And basically what we want to do is create one of these for every variation we have. So we want to choose a color and we want to choose a size. But for another type of item, we might have 3 different variation types. So that's why we can't hard code this. We need to loop through those variations and create the form fields dynamically. So the way that we're going to do that is just by here inside the form, accessing the data.variations, and then we're going to map through all of them. So we'll say for each variation, then we're going to return a form field like this. And instead of using a drop down, I'm going to use the select component. So we can actually come up top here, get rid of the drop down, and we'll import select. So then all of these properties remain the same. We'll then just need to add a key to the form field. So that's going to come off of v.id. We're going to need to give this select a name. We're also going to need to give it a value, and we're also going to need to give it the options. Now the options comes from all of the item variations that belong to this variation type. So that means for the variation color, the options are going to be red, blue, and green, and those are the item variations. So we can actually loop through them here from accessing v. So that's just going to be v.itemVariations.map. So for each item, we're going to return an object, and this object has to have certain properties in order for it to be rendered correctly in the select or drop down component. The first is the key, which is kind of like this key here, and that's just going to be item.id. Then we need to display some text. So that's the text that actually shows up in the select field. So that's the text key, and that's going to be item.value. So where value is red, blue, or green, those are the value fields. Then we need to give it an actual value. This value is the value that's submitted when the form is submitted. So this is the actual data we want to send to the server. And in this case, because this is a select field and we are choosing the item variation we want, it's a many-to-many field. So when we add items to the many-to-many field, we add them as the primary keys of those instances. So that means it's going to be the item ID as the value we want to actually submit to the server. This variation, we can actually grab the name of the variation here above. So we'll say name equals v.name. And I'm going to say .to lowercase so that we just have a consistent naming. And we want the name of that field to be lowercase as well. So we'll say name equals name. And then I'll also output here, choose, instead of an option, it's going to be choose a color or choose this. So if we check this out already, we already have choose a color, and we have red, blue, and green, and then we have small and medium. And you can see that when you select them, you get the primary key of that instance. So red has a primary key of 1. That's being logged out here in our handle change method. So the value of the color is 1 and the value of the size is 4. Now we need to store this in the state somehow, so that when we submit the form, we can access all of that data we've selected. What I'm going to do is create a value here, which is going to be called form data, and it's going to initialize as an empty dictionary or empty object. And what we want to do is when we handle change, we want to change the value of the property inside that form data. So we can start by getting form data from this.state. Then we can say that the updated state equals to the spread of the form data that it is currently, and then just change the name of this field, or of this key rather. So if it's color that was passed in, then change color to be that value. So change color to be red, which is 1 that we saw, and then change size to be 4, for example. Then we just set the state to be the new updated state. So form data is now and we can actually just call this updated form data and specify that there. Cool, so that is our method to handle change. Then with this, we need to pass the form data into our render method. So I'm going to add it here. And when we come here into our form field, the value of this field, if it has been selected, needs to also come from that form data. And that's just simply by accessing form data and then the name of the field, which is name. So like that, you're then accessing the value of that key. So if we come back here and we test it out, then it still works. Cool. So lastly, we want to handle submit. So we can come here and I'll actually add primary. So handle add to cart, we can just come over here, and what it's doing is setting the state to be loading. We post to the add to cart URL, which takes the slug of the item, and that's going to change a little bit. So what we want to do is basically pass the item variations in. So all we need to do is then grab the item variations that we've specified, which are captured in the state, and then pass them in as data in here as well. So what we can do is just start with constant form data equals to this.state. So we now have the actual form data, and we can go and console log the form data to see what it looks like. And I'm just going to comment out the rest. So if we come back here and select something and hit submit, we get color is 1, size is 4. So there's our object. But now if we try and submit it like this, we're going to get an error because our many-to-many field is expecting an array of primary keys. So basically it wants to get this data as 1 and 4. That's how it wants to receive the data. The reason for this is because size and color are both item variations. It doesn't matter that they are about something different. So one is relating to color and one's relating to size. They're both the same model class. So we need to submit the data like this. So just convert all of the values of these keys and convert it into an array. So just map them all into one array. So we're just going to add a helper method to do that. So we'll call it handle format data, which is going to take in that form data. And basically we want to return object.keys of that form data and then map through each of the keys. So for each key, we're going to return the value in that object. So that's going to be form data of key. And like this, we'll have a new array that contains all of the values of that object. So we can just use this method here and we can say constant variations equals this dot handle format data of form data. And then we can just console log all of that. So if we come back, we can just clear that out and submit again. And then we get 1 and 4. And that's just me typing there. So yeah, there's our data. So now we can submit the variations just like that. So I'm going to uncomment this. And then the variations we can pass in as some data in our request and keep everything else the same. So now we just need to make sure that our view actually receives this data and does something with it. So that's going to be inside our view. So we can, not in here, but in our API views, we want to go to this view, the add to cart view. And here where we get the slug, we want to get the variations. So this is just going to be the same as that. And let's go and print the variations to see that we get it. So I'll just open up the terminal here. Okay, so let's specify here, submit, and there we go. There we see 1 and 4. So that data is coming through. And now there's going to be some few changes here on our add to cart view to account for the new item variation logic. First, if we don't get any variation data, then this is going to be an empty array or an empty list. And if we have an empty list, that means that we don't have enough of the item variations to validate that this was a valid add to cart request. So just like we're doing if slug is none, we want to do a similar thing and check if the length of the variations is smaller than the minimum required number of variations. Now here where we get the item is very important because if we look at the model, we can look here at the variation. The variation is linked to the item. So if it's the shirt has 2 variations that are linked to that shirt. So that means we want to filter all of the variations that have the item as the item we're trying to add. So since we're trying to add a shirt, we want to find all of the variations that are linked to that shirt, which in this case is size and color. And that means that the count of that query set is 2. So the minimum number of variations we need is 2. So I'm just going to grab these and come back here to our view and just make sure we import them here. So that's from core.models, import both of these. Okay, so we can just come back here. So right after we get the item, what we want to do is check for the minimum variation count. So we'll say minimum variation count equals 2, and we're going to filter all of the variation objects where the item equals to the item that we're grabbing, which is the shirt, and then say dot count. So that's our minimum variation count. Then we want to check if the length of our variations is smaller than the minimum variation count. If it is, then we want to return a response, and we're just going to say, please specify the required variations, and that's our little validation there. Then continuing from this, we have this get or create call on the ORM, and basically what we're doing is checking if any order items contain the following properties. If it does, then we're just getting that order item and then continuing with it here. Otherwise, we're creating it. Now the issue with this is that we're going to create duplicates, because if we're adding a shirt, it doesn't matter what variations they are according to this logic. So instead what we need to do is first we'll create this into a query set, and instead of saying get or create, I'm going to say filter. So we're going to filter based on this criteria, and then we want to check all of the variations that have been added to this item. And the reason for this is because that's the only way we can actually see if it's a unique item that's being added to the cart. So if we have a shirt that's in the cart and it's red and small, we want to check that if we add another one to the cart, is it a red and small shirt? If it is, then we just increase the quantity of that item. If it's not, and it's, let's say, red and medium, then we have to add a completely new order item. So this is the first step in our query set. Then we're going to need to filter the many-to-many field, which is the item variations. So for every variation that we add in here, which is going to be the primary keys of those item variations, which we saw was 1 and 4, we want to check, going from this order item query set, if we do have any in there, filter it again and see if there are any that contain the first variation we've added. So that was the color of 1. So are there any order items that have an item variation with a primary key of 1? And then do it again and check, are there any order items that have an item variation with a primary key of 4? So basically looping through all of the item variations that we're getting from here and check them against the many-to-many field in our query set here. So the way this is going to look is by saying for v in variations, remember this is 1 and 4, so I'll just comment that out. So we're going to get 1, primary key of 1, and then primary key of 4. Then we want to check on the order item query set. We're going to say it equals to the previous query set, and then filter it again. And here we want to check for item variations exact equals to v. So first it's going to take that order item query set It's going to check, are there any order items where the item variations contains 1 and then contains 4. So after all of that, then we will check if the order item query set dot exists. So if it does exist, then we're going to grab the only item that exists in the query set. So we'll say that this is the order item, and that's just going to be the query set dot first. And because it does exist, that means that we added the same item again. So now it's justified to increase the quantity by 1. So like this, and then we save the order item. Otherwise, if the order item query set does not exist, that means we're adding a new item to the cart. Then we want to basically just grab that and say our order item equals to objects.create. And here we are creating where the item is the item, user is user, and ordered is false. And then we're going to add the item variations, which we've gotten here, these variations. So we're going to add those variations to the order item. So the way we do that is just by saying order item dot item variations dot add. And because we're adding a list 1 and 4, we could actually loop through all of that by just saying star variations. So that'll just make it easier to add all those variations at once instead of looping through them and adding them individually. And once we've done that, then we need to say order item dot save. So that's the order item. Basically, by doing all of this, we've either increased the quantity of an existing order item or we've added a completely new item. And then we get onto the order itself. So this logic here, we can change most of this. First, we have the order query set where we're filtering for ordered equals false, checking if the order exists, then grabbing that specific order. And basically, this logic here where we were filtering to see if the item exists and then increasing quantity, we can go and delete all of that. And we just want to check, we can actually bring that back this query here and then get rid of all of that. Basically, we just want to check if this does not exist. So if this order does not contain this item, then add this to the cart. But instead of doing it via the slug, because that again defeats the purpose of the variations, we're going to do it with the ID. So that way, every order item has a unique ID, and we will add it to the order if it is not already in there. And so like that, we can actually first check that everything's running. Cool. So now we can go and test this out. If we hit submit, let's see, it's 500 internal, and it's just a response issue. And this is just over here. We can just bring it here outside of the if statement so that either way we still return a response. So let's come back here. We can just refresh this. I'm also going to go here into the admin, and if we check the order, here's the order for admin. We have 2 of this shirt. So let's just go back to the order items. And this is 1 red and small shirt and then 2 of that. So what I'm going to do is just delete that 2 of shirt and say yes. So this is 1 red and small shirt. So if we go and add a red medium shirt, we should see a completely new item added. Okay. So let's come back and we have 1 of shirt, red and medium, red and small. Cool. Now let's go and add a blue small shirt. Okay. And blue small. Cool. So now let's go and add another blue small. So we submit and we have 2 of shirt. So now we have 2 blue and small shirts. So the incrementing of the quantity works and checking if that item doesn't already exist in our order. Now we can just come back here to the order. So if we just go back here, we are seeing that those items are not being added to the cart. So we only have 1 of shirt still in there. So let's just come back here. And this is not meant to be item. This is meant to be order item. So filtering the order items where the item ID equals to the order item ID. Okay, cool. So let's go and test this again. And I'm just going to go back to those order items and just delete 2 of them here. Okay, so we have one of shirt. I'm actually going to delete all of them. And if we come back, okay, so I'm going to add red and medium, submit, okay, go to checkout. All right, we have one there. We have one of shirt there. Let's go to the order. Okay, there's one of shirt. Then let's go back and let's add blue small, submit, refresh here. Okay, cool. So they are being added to the order now. So that's correct. Now we just want it to be that if we go to checkout, here where it displays the item name, we wanted to see the variation of this item because they're not just shirts. We want to show that they are the different sizes and colors. So that we can just do in the order summary. We can just close that there. Here where we have order item.item.title, we're going to want to add more information over here. And what I'm going to do is add a method to help with this. So we can just say this is render variation, and it's going to take in the order item. So then inside this order item, we'll just say that some text equals to an empty string, and then we'll append the text onto that. So we're going to loop through all of the item variations for this order item. So we'll say order item dot item variations. Then we're going to say dot for each, so that we can append onto the text for each one. So for each item variation, we're going to say text plus equals to, and we can just output it dynamically like this. And that's just going to be item variation dot name, and that is either color or size. And we're going to say iv dot value, and that's the actual value. So it's going to be color red or size small. So like that. Then we have text being added on there, and we can just return that text, and we can use this render variation. We can actually call it render variations. So we can copy that and then come here, and this here will output as this dot render variations of order item. Cool. So if we come back here, now we have shirt, color, red, size, medium, and we can actually just come over here and we'll add a comma and a space there. Okay. So it's not the greatest visualization of it, but at least we are seeing that the data actually is different. And other than that, everything is still the same and it still works. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a comment down below and let us know what you thought. And otherwise, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.